This episode is brought to you by the supporters of 40 Watt Podcast over on Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast, where for as little as $3 per month, you can help support the podcast and get every episode ad-free. For $5 a month, you'll get every episode ad-free, as well as a bonus episode every week. I can't overstate how thankful I am for the support of my patrons, and hope you'll consider joining the team and helping keep this show on the road. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of 40 Watt Podcast. I'm very excited to be with you again this week. I know it's been a little while. I appreciate all of your patience as, life happens. But I've got a bunch of really great episodes lined up for the rest of this year. I think you're going to really enjoy a lot of them. All of them. I hope you're going to enjoy all of them, but I think, they're all going to be pretty special. So before we get started, let's talk about a couple of housekeeping things before we get going. This podcast is brought to you by a few people that I need to tell you about. First of all, I need to talk about Barry over at Grez Guitars, who make some of the most incredible guitars I've ever played. In fact, his new model, the Grand Tour, I had like the tiniest bit to do in making that guitar come to life because I wanted it. I wanted it so very badly. So, and now it exists. And I'm going to get my dirty little hands on it very, very soon. I finally got to play it at Fretboard Summit. And I can't be happier. As we're recording it, we're a couple of weeks out from it ending up at my house. And so go over to Grez Guitars. Links are down below. Click them. Check out the stuff Barry's making. Get a Mendocino at the very least. It's one of the greatest guitars I've ever played. They're super light, incredibly resonant, old school reclaimed redwood. I mean, you can tell all the things. Go check the stuff out. Follow the YouTube channel, Instagram. You can hear everything that's going on. Additionally, I want to mention pedal sponsor of this podcast is Summer School Electronics. Mark Turley is making some really, really fun pedal. I think he's got some of the most fun branding out there. Got a new pedal out. I've actually got it right here. I've been doing some playing around with it. This is the Extra Credit Boost from Summer School Electronics. It's really, really rad. It's got two different versions. One that adds not just a volume boost, but it also adds a brightness knob so that if you're boosting an amp and you need to bring some of that brightness back into it, if your amp's already kind of gained up a little bit, you can do that. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I can't wait to run it into a bunch more amps really loud when I can get them loud. But check out all the stuff he's doing, the class reunion, the science fair. He's got some really, really great pedals. And you really need to grab a couple of them or all of them. And he does custom art. I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to do the custom art. If he gets too busy, the custom art's going to be hard to get done. But you can get your face on a pedal, or your dog's face, or your cat's face on a pedal. You should go over Summer School Electronics. Links are all down below. And lastly, this podcast literally could not happen if it were not for my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. I want to thank the newest member of the Patreon team, Peter Pesci. Thank you. I probably pronounced that wrong because I can't pronounce it like Joe Branton does, but thank you so much for joining the team and supporting this podcast and helping keep it going. All of your support really does make a massive difference. So this week, I've got David Browne from Browne Amplification and Browne Pedals. You've probably seen them all over the place. There's a ton of players using them. I finally got to play some at Fretboard Summit. I think he's making some of the coolest pedals. They're very nuts and bolts. They're, great drives, fuzz, super simple to use, comes dual pedals, couple of single pedals. You really should check him out. We had a great conversation talking about his path into building pedals and amps, his time as a guitar tech and as a guitar builder. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and I hope you do. Leave a comment below. Remember to like, subscribe, share with friends. Leave a review if you're listening to the podcast version. And hope you enjoy the episode. Forty Watters, welcome to this week's episode of 40 Watt Podcast. I'm so excited to have you joining me. Thank you so much for your patience, as it's been a while since you've seen me. But this week is sort of still brought to you by, you've heard about the sponsors. I talked about them before this episode started, so you can go check those out. They're all listed up there, which I'm going to record after we record this episode. That's the behind the curtain how this works. But been talking about Fretboard Summit the last couple of episodes. Well, this is another one of those connections I made because of Fretboard Summit. This week I have David Browne from Browne Amplification, Browne Amps. Browne, David, how do you shorten it? Is it Browne
Browne Amps
Amplification?
is great. Browne
Okay,
Amplification
perfect.
is great.
Yeah, which is funny because I obviously heard of you through your pedals, and so it's always interesting to me when I discover a company that's like, for example, Benson Amps.
Yeah.
I was way out of touch with Benson Amps. Then he puts out a pedal, and I'm like, oh, Benson Amps. Let me pay attention. Same thing with Nick Greer, and it's really interesting these amp companies evolving into pedal companies. But
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's get into that a little bit for my listeners before I go on a full-on ADHD mania rant.
Which I will join you on.
Oh yeah, it's gonna happen. My listeners know by now that this is just how this works. Um, let's do the backup. Let's tell the story. How'd you get into guitar? How'd you decide you want to start making things? And how'd you become one of what I refer to the lunatics who start a pedal company?
Let's see. I started playing electric guitar when I was about 14 or 15. Wanted to play drums, wanted to play bass. It was a real challenge to have musical instruments in my home. So I had a friend who got an electric guitar, and I used to bike over to his house every day, and we would play guitar for hours. Fast forward a ways, I was goofing around with a friend's little brother and fell and broke this bone in my hand, like the classic football break.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I couldn't play guitar for months. So I decided, well, I can't play guitar. I'm going to build a guitar. So I had measured a bunch of necks that I really liked and basically spec'd out what would be my perfect Strat. And I built myself a Strat. And it was the best guitar I'd ever played. And so I was like, which, isn't saying all that much because I'd never owned any nice guitars.
Sure.
But it was fantastic. And so then a few years later, I built a couple Telecasters, one for myself and one for a friend. And had an amplifier that broke, and it cost me a ton to get it fixed, a Tweed Bassman. Apparently the output transformer went out, which is, maybe that is what happened, maybe that isn't. But I paid a lot. I paid more, I think, to fix it than I paid for the amp. So I had a friend who had lots of blackface fenders and was like, man, you should learn to work on these old fenders. And my dad was a mechanical engineer. I grew up fixing up old cars and restored a bunch of early 60s, well, late 60s, but not 70s Mustangs, which is kind of what I did for a hobby before I turned 18 or so. And so, fixing stuff was second nature. And so I started fixing amps, and it just went from there, building custom amps, and just kind of went on.
It's kind of interesting, just as a weird side note. The number of amp and pedal people who are car people, like build and restore cars. I haven't had him on the podcast yet because we can't get schedules lined up, but I talked to Eli over at Two Rock a little bit, and Eli also
total motorhead.
does car. Yeah, total motorhead. You've got Mike Piera up at Analog Man's, a hardcore Porsche guy, still races them. It's interesting the number of people that do this that have that correlation into cars. I don't know if it's that whole 50s rock and roll and hot rods all went hand in hand.
Doesn't hurt.
I don't know which one is, chicken or egg here.
I think working on cars and learning to do all that, just rebuilding them and all that, just, really lent itself to making things. And I've been making things since I was, big enough to hold a hammer. So we always fixed everything that broke, and it's just kind of the way I've always been.
I am the guy who broke things more after they broke, and never quite figured out how to fix them. I was actually, I loved tinkering with stuff, but it was well into, I had this motorcycle that I had laid down, and then it sat in a garage for a couple of years, right? Before I finally got around to I want to ride again, and I'm going to fix it. And that's when I started. Luckily, YouTube was around at that point. So I started watching YouTube videos on cleaning out carburetors, and because I didn't drain the gas tank, learning how to get rust out of a gas tank. And it was a lot of fun learning how to rebuild it, got it running again. I rode it for a couple of more years before I finally sold it on and decided just motorcycles weren't for me. Had a friend pass away riding, and caught gravel, and of course he wasn't wearing a helmet. But after that, I got paranoid riding, and I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore.
You're talking street bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a I was a big dirt bike guy. I rode street bikes a couple of times and realized my lack of impulse control combined with the way people drive, this isn't gonna. I'm gonna get mad at somebody, and I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, when I laid that bike down, it was very early on in riding for me, and part of the reason it got laid down is because I tried to make a maneuver that was easy on a dirt bike. It was not quite so. I wasn't going very fast, and I caught a pothole, and I
yeah.
tried to avoid it, and yeah, it wouldn't have been.
That front end didn't come up, did it?
It did not. No, it did not. It did not work the same way. The 1100cc motorcycle I was riding was a lot heavier than the 400cc dirt bikes I used to ride. So, but yeah, I think there's a interesting correlation between, and it is. I think it's just people who build things.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be cars, but I do find it is often cars and motorcycles and stuff like that.
Well, it got me into, fixing things, changing things, and everything can be taken apart and put it back together. So once I started, getting deep into guitars and pedals and amps, I just started modifying stuff because it was like, well, I really like this, but it doesn't have the mid range is sitting over here, and I want the mid range to sit here. Or, played in a band for a bunch of years, and how do I make my guitar signal sit right here so that I'm not getting in the way of the bass player who's doing something awesome, and I'm not getting in the way of the lead guitar player who's doing something awesome, but my guitar can still come through. And so all of my amps, pedals, guitars, that ethos was kind of in there. Like, how do you make it sit well in a mix and do what it's supposed to do without getting in everybody else's way?
Yeah, and there's something else to be said for developing that skill early. As we approach and are sitting firmly in midlife, and have accumulated gear. I think back to like 18-year-old me, 19-year-old me, 20-year-old me that had like a guitar that I bought in a pawn shop and an amp that worked most days, and being able to fix your own gear and your buddy's gear to be able to play. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
So you're building, you're fixing amps, not building, you're repairing amps, you're building guitars. That's something I learned today about you. We never discussed that when I met you at Fretboard Summit. So you get into that. How long fixing amps before you start building your own, and then how long before you like pedals?
So the guy that I was in a band with really wanted an AC30, and we looked at the good AC30s, and they were either already restored and were totally out of reach, or they were a basket case that had caught fire or whatever and needed a ton of work. And I said, well, why don't we just build one? So we built an AC30 for him, and I have it. I bought it back from him recently. He said, hey, I'm not using this. It's too loud for everything I'm doing. Do you want it? And I was like, I really do. But
That's awesome.
Weber silver bells in it. And I mean, it's amazing. Loud and chimey and all the things you want an AC30 to be. So that just snowballed. Well, if I want an amp, I should just build it.
I love that mentality of, well, if I want it, I'm going to build it. I'm envious of folks who do that, because I don't have that gene. I want to be able to build things, but I don't have patience, and I have that typical. What do they talk about it now? It's like the kids that were in gifted programs in the 80s. They end up just being not great at everything because they expect to be good at things immediately because things were easy back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when math came easy to me. I long for those days. So when I first decided I wanted to try woodworking, and it didn't work out quite the way I wanted it to, I was like, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
That's not the truth. Listeners, you can do anything that you decide to put the time in building the skill. I didn't.
I think some things come easier to some people. Some people have a propensity for something, but nobody gets there without working real hard.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. So, you're building, you build this AC30. How long before you start building, like, I want to do this?
Well, I loved doing it. I loved building guitars. I loved building amps. Doing this for a living required that I sold them for massive amounts more than anybody was interested in paying. I mean, guitars are now, like custom electric guitars are now selling for prices that people can afford to do that for a living. Some of them.
Yeah.
Some amps are now selling for those prices. But back then it was like, can you build it for $1,500? And I'm like, yeah, I can totally do that. And then, it takes 40 hours and you make $200 profit. And it's like, this isn't really adding up. But I've always built amps. I have way too many half-built amps, so many projects in the works. I mean, that's the downside of I'm just going to build it for myself is I have, boxes and boxes of unbuilt amps. But, someday I'll retire and that's what I'll do. So that's what I tell myself anyway.
It sounds like a fun retirement gig, though.
I mean, I'm not mad at it.
No.
But, then it quickly translated into pedals. Like I've got a tube screamer. And when I step on it, it doesn't do what I want it to do. It does something of what I want it to do, but it needs more bass. It needs less mid-range. It needs, things shifted around. I would like it to clip a little, and so it spiraled into that. Big muffs, tube screamers, fuzz faces, I have hordes of germanium transistors that I'm thinking
Don't say that too loud. Don't say that too loud.
I'm going to build them into fuzz pedals one of these days. Yeah. I've got several designs that I'm really excited about. It just requires lots of my time. And that's the thing I can't seem to find these days with 3 teenagers and a 9-year-old. And
oof. Yeah, no, that's all your time. That's done.
Yeah.
You need those extra 4 hours in the day I hear some people have. I don't know how they're getting away with these 28-hour days, but they're managing it. I sure would like it.
Yeah.
So that was the interesting thing that I was like, because I did the minorest amount of research before we started chatting, and I went over your website. I'm like, well, Browne Amps, it's all pedals.
Yeah.
That's what you basically do now. It's like, because you're right. And people want to complain about the price of amps, and I totally get it. But unless you're building on a large scale with, can purchase in bulk to make it as affordable as possible, it's really hard to build, especially in the US, build, in a 1 or 2 or 3 person shop, amps at a price that everybody would say, oh, that's totally affordable.
And you need people that really want to do it or super passionate about it, that are going to do it at the quality that you're going to do it. And you're going to have to train them how to do it. And eventually they're just going to decide, well, I'm going to go do that myself. And I mean, Godspeed, they should do that. But it's tough.
Yeah. Cause then you're turning around, you're retraining someone every couple of years at least. And that's fine. Like you said, that's absolutely okay. That's the way apprenticeships and that kind of situation works. You learn a skill, then you move on and do it for yourself if you want to. Some people are okay. They're like, no, I don't want to run a business. I don't want to do that. I just want to do this. If you can find those people, listener, hold on to them for everything you can.
Yeah. I take really good care of my people, and the reason is they're really hard to replace.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. So so when I remember you coming on the scene, it was because of the protein.
Yep.
I feel like I'm safe in saying that was the first pedal that really kind of latched on for y'all.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
That was the first pedal I ever made.
Is it really?
In production, yeah.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. Was that, because I don't know the history of releases for Browne Amps. So that was the first pedal you released commercially.
So I was touring full time as a guitar tech, and I love it. I love doing it, but I needed to be at home. And so 2018, I mean, I had the protein. I built it for my buddy Adam. It was what we wanted it to be, but putting it into production was really tough, and it took a lot of years of figuring out how to make that seamless. And I say seamless, how to make it work at all. And so we finally figured it out in 2018, 2019. I did a run of 100 of them and sunk all the extra money that we had into that and said, if I sell half of them, I'll make our money back, babe, and let's give it a go. And I've been playing catch up ever since.
That's awesome. I also love the fact that it's because, so I've had a bunch of pedal makers on here, and so many of them were in that I was stuck at home in 2020 and, decided I wanted to make a go at this, and now they're doing, and that's awesome. You had your timing. You're like making a go right before and everything went wild.
And everybody that I had been on tour with was stuck at home for, I would have not had a job. I probably would have still gotten taken care of by the person I was working for because he's a wonderful man. But yeah, really, really incredible, blessed timing.
Yeah, absolutely. So in all this time, and I'm curious, especially now, because I seem to doubt it with, 4 kids, especially 3 teenagers that are barely human at that age anyway. Um, Listeners, if you don't believe me, go spend some time with some teenagers. I'm telling you. And for those of you listeners that are teenagers, yes, there's a few of you. Analytics tell me. I'm sorry, I don't mean offense, but you're not really fully human yet.
You're going to be awesome.
Yeah, you're going to be awesome. So in that time, you've done the tech thing. Are you still doing, or how long did you try to also still do amp repair? I'm sure you were doing some of that for a while.
Yeah, I still do some of that. I still do.
Do you really?
I'm setting up a bunch of basses for a friend of mine right now. So this really wonderful thing happened when I decided to come off the road, and that is that Josh Scott said, "Hey, I've got some amps that I'd like." Because I've been working on his amps since he moved to Kansas City.
Gotcha.
He's a good friend. He's a good dude. Built him some guitars, different stuff. But he said, "Would you work on some of these amps that I have?" And I said, "Sure." And I came over and saw how many amps he had that he wanted me to work on, and said, "Okay." And took a few of them home, fixed them up, brought them back, and he said, "I think this would be a lot faster if you just set up in this back room. You can share an office with somebody." And so I just set up shop, and it had to be 6 months. I went through all his old Fenders. I rebuilt a ton of, I had rebuilt some Sobtechs for him. He loves these old Sobtechs, but
yeah, I've seen the collection.
The pots need to be replaced. It's a lot of work. So I did a bunch of Sobtechs for him. I had one that I don't think it ever worked. I think it was a idea that somebody had, and they put it all together, but I don't think it ever worked. And I said, if we rework the power supply and do it like this, I know I can make this work. If we try to stick with this half ampeg power supply, I'm unsure. I don't think it's got the right power supply for it. So went through a lot of amps for Josh, and that was an awesome time being there, just kind of observing the way his shop ran, the way he did things. I was kind of like, I want to do, if I'm going to do this, I want to do much smaller scale, but learned a ton. And he's been an awesome friend and advisor for years, and I really appreciate him. He really encouraged me to do this, which, I don't know that he would encourage a lot of people to start a pedal company.
Right. There's a reason I call people who start pedal companies lunatics.
Yeah.
I don't mean it derogatorily. I think you have to be a little bit of a maniac to want to do this, though, because
I am a little bit of a maniac.
It's a wild industry to get into, and there's so many people. There's a lot of people doing it, and we sort of talked before we started. 2024 has been an interesting year for musical instrument industry. NAMM, starting to peek around the corner, coming up and see what's going on. Seeing a lot of releases, listeners, as we're recording this, like this week, there's been in the last 7 days, there's been monster release after monster release as people are starting to try to drum up that post-summer interest.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody expects the summer lull.
Yep.
And so it's all starting to happen a little bit more. I'm hoping that without being political, because that's not what the podcast is for, but election years in general tend to be tough economic years because there's a lot of breath holding. That's what I've been saying.
People
it's collective breath holding. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be an interesting time to do this kind of thing. But you've got a bunch of really cool pedals that I finally got to play at Fretboard Summit. Got to play through everything that you had there. I think you had one of everything there.
Everything that's out.
Yeah, everything that's right. Everything that's out. We did talk about something that wasn't out. That honestly, listeners, I couldn't spill it for you if I wanted to because there was so much going on that week and weekend.
Man,
that
what a weekend.
I don't remember details.
Yeah.
A bunch of people just straight up told me releases they have coming out in the next 3 and 4 months, and I don't remember.
It's like everybody just assumed we'd all signed an NDA.
Right. I love how It's weird doing what I do, even on like a small scale of this podcast. I have builders who will just text me pictures of, hey, look at this, check this out. And it's like, they just assume I'm not going to tell anyone. And I don't, because I respect that. But it's really funny. We see things like the leaks of some of these things out in the industry. And I'm like, half the time it's because the builder's too excited about it and can't keep it in themselves.
We had a really funny thing happen with the Carbon X. David Ryan Harrison, I had been working on this for a while. He asked for it a long time ago. He played the protein, loved it, and said, hey, what if we did this? And so I finally got around to building one of what he wanted. And we went back and forth a couple of times, and he had it on his pedal board and did a rig rundown.
Yeah, I saw that rig rundown.
I was like, oh, we're announcing. I was like, Dave, are you good with it where it's at? And he's like, yeah, I love it. He's like, I'll sing it from the rooftops. I was like, okay, let's go. It's out.
That's awesome.
Not really.
I love that kind of thing. It's like, oops, we're released. Here we go.
Well, and he played it, and it sounded awesome. And I was like, cool.
That's so great. I do really appreciate so going back to your pedals, and I have my cheat sheet that's called browneamps.com. But y'all did something that I really appreciated that I think I've seen some other people do with their releases. So you release this dual-sided pedal as your first pedal, which I love dual-sided overdrive pedals. Mm-hmm. I really do. I like dual pedals in general. Yeah. I'm trying to convince someone to make me a really rad fuzz tremolo, but everybody keeps balking on the idea. It's usually the tremolo side of it everybody balks on. They're like, tremolos are hard to get right, I guess.
Well, now nobody can use an LDR, so that I know is thanks cadmium.
Yep, thanks cadmium. Yeah, and I'm just sitting here looking around like the day that I found out about that. So listeners, in case you're not aware, we'll cover this just very briefly because we've not talked about it on the podcast at all, even though it's super old news at this point. So ROHA, which I have no idea what that acronym stands for, or is it
ROHS?
ROHS, yes.
And I can't tell you either.
Idea. Yeah, no idea. Basically, it's an organization that monitors hazardous chemicals and whatnot. Light-dependent resistors, LDRs, which are responsible for so much in electronics, they have cadmium in them, and cadmium is bad for you to ingest. So apparently too many people are eating guitar pedals. So
don't lick your pedals either.
Right, don't lick them. Please don't. Please don't. Especially some of the older ones. That could be lead-based paint. Who knows what EHX was using back in the day?
Not even EHX.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Yes,
no one's
obviously.
using lead paint. Yeah, but
or lead solder.
Or lead. Oh, yeah, lead solder is a whole other ball game. As a novice solderer, I will tell you, just lead solder is easy to work with. It's really fun. Sucks. But
sorry.
Did I say you can't use these. What's that?
Did I say that out loud? Sorry.
It's fine. Nobody heard it. It's fine. We'll just edit that out. I don't edit anything, by the way. But they you can't use the LDRs that everybody was using. That's why Chase Bliss discontinued like 5 pedals.
Yeah.
Although the plan, as I understand, is to bring them back just once they figure out what they're going to do instead. I remember looking around and being like, I have so many things that I know have LDRs in it. I'm like, well, just not going to say anything. But
I think it's just the EU that has banned it.
Yeah, it's just the EU that has banned it. And also, I mean, I have to wonder, like, just getting off in the weeds here. Let's do the weeds.
Yep. Are
they going to, like, dismantle your pedal to see if you're using, like, an old version that has LDRs or not?
Well, the reality is you can't legally put the ROHS stamp on it if you're not Rojas compliant. And so if you were to lie about it, you would be incredibly liable. I have no idea what that would result in, like fine wise, but you can't lie about that stuff.
But So as a manufacturer, yes. As a player, like, are they going to be like inspecting? Like, if I had to do a fly gig
Oh no,
and I
no,
took
no,
a
no.
pedal,
No, it's just
yeah,
for import and sales. And
okay,
honestly, to break an LDR and ingest the cadmium inside would be its own feat. I mean, I'm sure there's a scenario where something could break and it could, it could be,
yeah.
it's
I'm sure the
kind of like
bigger
the
I'm
old
sure the bigger
thermometers.
worry was actually like landfills filling up with this stuff and it breaking
Just
down into the
landfills full of
yeah.
Chase Bliss pedals, and my heart is literally breaking in my chest right now thinking about that.
Right? Like who's tossing
Who's throwing
pedals
their
in
pedals away?
landfills? Yeah. They can be fixed. They can. We literally just talked about it.
Done it for
Uh,
years.
yeah. But so I also remember it was so on I do Guitar Nerds. The last couple of years I've done the Guitar Nerds podcast Gear of the Year episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think unless Joe kicks me off, I'm doing it again this year. And I think it was last year, we were talking about the Thorpe ER2, his Univibe that he had just released like a couple of months previously. And we were talking about it for Gear of the Year. I have one. I love it. I actually bought it while we were talking about it on recording that episode. And we realized, because I went to the website to try to look up the specs on it, it wasn't on his website anymore. And so we asked him, and he said, yeah, it's like there's this thing that
Yep.
I don't know where it's going to go yet. Now we know it was this cadmium LDR thing where he couldn't use that circuit after, and be ROS compliant.
A Univibe needs 4 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it swirls.
So hold on to your Univibes, y'all.
Yep.
You're not getting any more unless, somebody's just like, I'm not sending them to Europe anymore.
Well,
it's fine.
I mean, that, that's a real option. I really am impressed with the way Chase Bliss handled it, but my question was, why don't you just continue to sell them in the US? But there's probably something I don't know there. There's a lot of things I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot. And I understand. I would bet, and I don't have any kind of extra background market. I love Joel and I love the folks over at Chase Bliss, and that's about as far as it goes. I love those folks. But I'd imagine with the stuff they make, I'm going to generalize and I'm going to piss off so many people, both American and European, and I'm so sorry. I feel like a lot of music coming out of Europe is typically very effects heavy, so I bet they have a large customer base in Europe.
Yeah.
And so
offering something and not offering it to that market would be offensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was like when I discovered Rogue Dead Guy Ale. And I'm actually going to make this make sense, I promise. Rogue Dead Guy Ale is based in Washington, maybe in Oregon. I can't remember. Anyway, Pacific Northwest, right? Where great beer, the birthplace of great beer. And so I discovered it when I was living in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I was in a bar in Nashville, and I tried it for the first time, and I was like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And then I moved back home to Mississippi and was like, why can I not get this here? And then I did finally find a place that had it, and it didn't taste the same. And I just didn't know why, so I stopped drinking it. Well, that's when I discovered that Rogue had a contract brew. I think it was a contract brewing for a lower ABV version of Dead Guy Ale to get under the Mississippi ABV laws for beer. And so it wasn't the same as what I'd had in Tennessee. Now those laws have been changed, and I can get the real thing now. So don't feel bad for me. This is not a woe is me.
You can still send him cases.
Exactly. You can still send me cases. Look, I don't have a beer sponsor for this podcast yet. So if Rogue, if you're listening, I'm here. Let's talk. But yeah, similar thing. It feels bad to offer one thing in one place and then have to do a different version or just not offer it somewhere else.
Or a lame version.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a lower version. ABV.
Yeah. like 5% Rogue Dead Guy Ale. I'm like, this is so bad.
Doesn't taste the same.
Why is it so bad?
Yep.
So anyway, that's a total tangent. Didn't mean to get there, but figure we should talk about that. But that it leads to another really good point about manufacturing in this industry. That I love talking to builders about, and we get like in the weeds of the building, is that as musical instrument builders, especially pedals and amps, you're beholden to parts that are made for other industries.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've talked about this on this podcast before, and other people have talked about it. A lot of people don't really think about how small the musical instrument industry is in comparison to medical technology, for example, which is where a lot of these parts were designed for.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, X-ray machines still use vacuum tubes. That's like the number one use of vacuum tubes manufactured in the world today, I think. It uses different ones, but if something happened to the X-ray machine industry and suddenly they didn't need vacuum tubes anymore, that's when we might have to start worrying about vacuum tubes and guitar amps going away.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I did know that at one point early on in production, there was a part that we needed for the protein that was already sometimes hard to find, but Tesla bought all of them, all that were in production, and no one had any, and no one was gonna have any for 9 months.
Wow.
And again, Josh to the rescue, had rolls and rolls and sold me a couple hundred to get us through our next run of 100, which got us through to where we could find him again. But, stuff like that is real and tough.
Yeah. It's not a fun time trying to source parts that aren't being manufactured exclusively for musical instruments or your musical tech. I think also in the tube talk, just to add, I think microwaves still use vacuum tubes. They're very strange looking. They don't look like, if you open up your microwave, you're not going to see anything that looks like a 6L6 or a 12AX7. It looks like it actually looks more like a transformer from the outside looking in. But that's also where a lot of the tubes.
Maybe don't even take your microwave apart.
Yeah, don't do that. That's probably the best. I told you I'm really good at taking broken things and breaking them more.
You did,
which is how I know this. And a 15-year-old Philip should have never been given a screwdriver is ultimately what it amounts to. So David, I'm curious, as a musician, do you still get to play out between the kids and the company? Do you still get to play guitar as much as you'd like?
No, not as much as I would like.
Yeah.
I play a lot down here in this small studio in my basement where I have looper setups and toys to play with late at night, not very loud. I do still get to gig some and play with friends, not as often as I would like, but often enough that I'm learning new things. I've been playing a lot of bass, and that's been really fun. If you're a guitar player, you probably can play the bass, but learning to play bass and play with a drummer is a whole different thing, and I've really, really enjoyed that.
This podcast is supported in part by Stringjoy Strings. I'm a snob, at least that's what people tell me. I'm never okay with good enough, and that's where Stringjoy Strings come in. They're better than good enough. They're the best. Stringjoy are making some of the finest strings available today right up the road from me in Nashville, Tennessee. They offer custom sets, balanced tension, coated strings, the works. If you need it, they can probably make it happen. You should be using Stringjoy Strings, and if you're going to order from them, you really could help this podcast out by clicking the affiliate link down in the description or show notes below. You get amazing strings, I get a little bit of that back to help the show keep going. It's a win-win situation. Get your Stringjoy Strings today. It really is a different skill set, and it's really satisfying.
Yes.
To do. There is nothing like getting together with a good drummer and playing bass and being able to lock in a groove that makes people make that funk face.
Yeah.
You know the one I'm talking about? Where we're like,
yeah. You get to tune the drums with the bass.
Yeah. But I've played a lot of bass over the years, and I'm not one of those folks. I know listeners, you expect me to be one of these people, but I'm not. I don't care if you play with a pick. I don't care if you play with your fingers. I don't care if you slap. I don't care. Whatever. Just play bass.
Yes.
Get a bass and play it.
I 100% want to just agree with that. If you are a musician who has an opportunity to play music and the thing that is the opportunity is play bass, man, you won't get to shred, and that's okay. Learn some cool fills and learn to do it. It will make you a better musician, and it will make you a better guitar player, and it will make you a better bandmate.
Oh, 100%. A much better bandmate. One of the best lessons I ever got about guitar was a throwaway comment that one of my friends, who is the best local guitarist I've ever heard, told me. And it was in the early days. I played in a lot of blues bands, and he was like, and I still overplay, but I really overplayed then. And he was like, "No, man. Here's the thing. Listen to the bass. If the bass is playing a lot of notes, you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
If the bass is not playing a lot of notes, well, you got a little more room. You can play a few more there."
Mm-hmm.
So like those bass walking bass lines for blues, you do not need to play a lot of notes there. Yep. There's a lot going on in the bass. And it was just like, he also told me the thing about overplaying, because he said this for himself. He said, play every third note that you want to play.
Brilliant.
And yeah, actually, I should start writing like a whole book of the things he would say that were just throwaway comments. He was also the guy who told me, if you want to learn to slow down as a player, only play when you're breathing out.
Ooh.
Because that's how horn players and vocalists do it. It's like,
makes you focus on your breathing too, which will make you relax and play better.
Yeah, it's simple little stuff like that to make you a better player. But playing bass is definitely up there. I also recommend playing drums. I know you said you wanted to learn to play drums.
I love playing drums.
Yeah, I'm such a bad drummer.
Oh, but terrible. But I mean, I love to turn on Led Zeppelin and try to play along.
So yeah, I spent a lot of time learning that rock and roll intro.
It's a great one.
It's a great one.
So I'm learning to golf, which is
really?
A strange thing for somebody who's 50 to be doing, but I'm really enjoying it. And it's really hard, and it also makes a lot of sense. You have to learn all this technique, and then when you go to hit the ball, you have to forget all about that technique and hit the ball and play slow. And so I've been really enjoying that analogy. And one of the things that's got me most excited about golf is one of my daughters is golfing, and that's the sport she decided to pick. She said, "You have to play a ball sport." She said, "I'm going to golf." And I was like, "Great, I'll go with you." But it's been really interesting to just to try to like absorb all this technique information and then get it all in there. And it's just like playing music. Then you just have to let it all, you have to hope it's in there and let it come out. Because if you try to think about it while you're doing it, you can't do it.
You're sunk. The moment you start trying to think about it, you're done.
Right.
I totally get it. You're also the second person in a week or two that have told me that, hey, my kid got into golf because they needed a fall sport, and so I'm playing with them for the first time ever. Matt over at the Guitar Dads podcast is his son decided to take up golf, and so he's starting to golf with him. I'm not much of a golfer. I own a set of hand-me-down clubs. My wife owns a set that we bought at a Play It Again Sports. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go out occasionally, and this is going to sound weird, the lesson that I learned from golf. I grew up a hyper-competitive person.
Mm-hmm.
I played baseball. I played football. I played basketball badly. Did track and field, throwing shot put and discus. Y'all know that I'm not a speed runner. But I was I bowled competitively. Like everything I did, I got competitive with it. Then a buddy of mine wanted me to go play golf. And it was so foreign to me. And I had the clubs before I ever went to play because they were hand-me-down from my uncle. It's like, sure. And we're playing a scramble format for listeners that don't know what that means. That means, you all hit, and whoever has the best shot, you just play from their location. So I could be as bad as I want to be, and it doesn't matter.
Yep.
And it broke my competitiveness because suddenly I was doing something I wasn't good at. And I knew I wasn't good at, and I was suddenly okay with it.
Yep.
So when I go out and I play golf, I'll take a 10 and it won't hurt my feelings. If I have to take more than 4 putts, I'm like, yeah, we're done here. Let's go.
That's one of the things I love the most about it. It just doesn't matter.
To me, I mean,
I love it. I care, but it doesn't matter. And I really need things like that in my life that doesn't really matter. You're just going to go have fun, have a beautiful walk on a nice day or a really hot day, whatever.
Yeah. Down here in Mississippi, they're all just really hot days.
Well,
yeah, that's all
it's hot here in the summer, hot and humid. So
yeah, I totally get it. And I think we all need those things. And, something that just breaks that you can just enjoy doing. And I know for a lot of guitar players and a lot of my listeners, that is playing guitar. That's the thing. You're not competitive. I tell people all the time, I can't explain the amount of joy I just get sitting in my living room strumming cowboy chords on an acoustic guitar. I don't need to be playing, speedy blues and rock licks or anything like that, or even playing any song in particular.
Yeah.
I just sit around and strum chords, and it's just relaxing.
Yeah, I play a lot in front of people, but I really, really enjoy playing when no one's listening and it doesn't matter, and I can just be super weird. I love pedals that make the guitar sound like it's not a guitar anymore, and just layering and layering and layering noise until I have a cathartic moment.
That's something I didn't expect, because with your pedals, predominantly drives and a fuzz.
Yep.
I really didn't expect that. So should we be expecting your micro looper pedal in 2025? Is that what we should be looking for?
I think loop pedals have been done really well. I mean, I've got like the Boomerang 3 and a sidecar, and it's awesome. I've got a Mood and I've got a Blooper, and they're incredible. Maris Enzo is one of my favorite pedals. A lot of those I have to have a MIDI brain that saves my settings, because you can take forever and get to some really cool thing and never get back there ever again. I've taken videos like, this is the pedal, this is the sound, this is the setting. Bye. Never see you again.
So I had Angelo and Terry from Maris on the podcast a couple months back, and my first Maris pedal was the Enzo. And I talked about that exact thing, about the fact that ultimately I moved it on. It was fun. It was fun to play, but I could never get back to the settings I found ever.
Yeah.
There was just, no matter how I documented it, whatever. And I've used MIDI. I don't want to use MIDI. Like, that's just who I am as a person. I also like to make the guitar not sound like a guitar anymore, but I almost always then try to make it sound like a Hammond organ. That's the thing I'm always shooting for. Rotary speaker, overdrive, and octave.
Yeah.
If I can get those three things and sound like an organ, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I love that.
So
the Morningstar MC8 was the thing that changed it for me, because it's not a MIDI cable. It's just it's a TRS, and it was, I can hook it up to my computer, and I can see where everything is, and I can find a setting and save it, and it pulls it back up exactly. And so I've got, 15 different sounds that I get from the Enzo that, I could get it with a whammy pedal. I could get it with, some other stuff, but it does a lot of stuff, and I love it. I know a lot of people don't like that pedal, don't like that pedal, have expressed it's difficult. And I agree.
I loved the sounds I could get, but it was the difficulty of getting back to sounds sometimes. Now, having said that, I did have the Morningstar MC6, and then at one point I had the MC6 Pro, back when I had a MIDI rig. I had the Pro for just like a hot minute. And I will say that those units are incredible, and they make programming MIDI much easier. I had previously tried to do MIDI programming with the Boss ES8, the big switcher, and just
I built some pedal boards with that, and the Morningstar really makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, the Boss E8, I did not like the programming for MIDI on that. The MC8 and the MC6 with that graphical programming that you can do by hooking it. Oh, it's just beautiful.
I also am a big fan of the RJM stuff. I think I had a mastermind on the board that we had at Fretboard Summit. Because I wanted to be able to put everything in a loop and turn it on and off easily and reroute stuff. And like with the fixer, I wanted you to be able to hear the signal without the fixer. The fixer doesn't have a bypass on it. And I did that on purpose because, it would have been another switch. And, if you like the buffer, for me, every time I take it out of the chain, it bums me out. So I just put it back. So it's like, you put that in, the buffer's there. You can switch between the boosts. You can hit the tuner mute, but it's just there doing what it does. But I wanted people to be able to hear what it was doing or feel what it's doing, because you can't. It's really hard to demo it.
Yeah. No, I have no idea how. Like, especially as someone who's done a handful, I don't know, a dozen or so YouTube demos. By the time it gets on YouTube and it gets through recording, there's no way that subtlety is going to be heard.
Right.
I've had people ask me to do compressor demos, and I'm like, no. Sponsors of this podcast have asked me to do compressor pedal demos. Like, I can't.
It's such a feel
I have no
thing.
idea. Yeah, absolutely. I'm also just not a compressor guy. It's fine. But I don't know how you would demo those things. And so to be able to take it in and out, that is great. And in fact, that time at Fretboard Summit, that's the only time I've ever seen one of the RJMs and actually used it. I say used it. I clicked the buttons to turn the pedals on and off. I didn't have to do the setup or anything.
You can also, that's another one that has a really good UI. You can plug it into your laptop and it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, see, that I'm trying not to go back to the big pedal board thing, but I will keep this in mind when I inevitably get the itch to build another big MIDI powered pedal board.
Yeah.
Because, we go through, it's just like music. We go through these cycles where now I'm on I want as compact a pedal board as possible kick.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm playing live with. Like, I wouldn't take this monster to a gig unless I was playing solo guitar.
Yeah. Or
was being brought in as the atmosphere guy.
Yeah, I do the cover band I'm in right now. I do a lot of the atmosphere in that, because it's covers, but we don't play them like the originals. It's very party band. It feels very much like Nashville Broadway. Someone yells out a song and half the band's looking up it on their phone kind of band gig. You know what I mean?
Fun.
It can be fun. Sure, we'll call it fun. No, it is fun, but it's a little nerve-wracking to be like. And then, of course, they'll call a tune where I do know the tune, and I'm like, crap, but you don't do it like this. Like, how am I going to make this work? Those kind of gigs. But I even sitting at home anymore, I just recently bought one used, the Thorpe. Interesting, we talked about it earlier, the Electric Lightning, because I wanted to try a tube overdrive.
Yeah.
I've never owned a tube overdrive, and so that seemed like a good one. I love Chris Buck, by the way. Spoiler alert, it does not make me sound like Chris Buck. But I've been just plugging that directly into an amp with no reverb even, and just playing that, and that's how I've spent the last 4 days.
Yeah.
That's just what I want to do.
I
just want to play. In fact, when I first plugged it in, I plugged in a one pickup guitar. Like, how minimal can I make this and be okay with it?
What does it do?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's who I am as a player. That's why, I'll be honest, that's why pedal companies like yours make a lot of sense to me. Even though you are into like the bigger expansive sounds, your pedals are very nuts and bolts. I look at Zach from Mythos the same way, very nuts and bolts, very Analog Man, all of my favorite companies, with a couple exceptions. I've come to love the Maris stuff, and I don't understand it. I use the presets and they sound amazing. But I want that philosophy, that simple, break it down, as few knobs as possible, as plug and play simplicity.
I just want it to be hard to make it sound bad, and I want it to be hard for it to get messed up for your gig, because I think that's a lot of where my brain goes, is like, okay, you're live, you've got 15 minutes to sound check, and if something is off and you've got to figure it out, it's just such a high stress situation, and most guys don't have a guitar tech and they don't have 2 hours, and I just want to make it hard to mess it up. And I want every way you could set the knobs that would be rational to sound good. No bad sounds.
Yeah, exactly. No bad sounds. It's the same reason I wish all wah manufacturers would put an indicator LED on their wah pedals, because there's nothing like realizing your sound is off and then realizing 3 songs in it's because your wah pedal is on. I played a musical once. We were doing Mamma Mia, and I played the first 3 songs of Mamma Mia with my wah pedal on.
Okay, were you toe down or heel down, or just stuck in the middle somewhere?
It was toe almost all the way down.
That's usually where it gets stuck on.
Yeah,
wow,
and it
my
was not good.
Thin and screechy.
Yeah, and I'm playing that intro from Mamma Mia, like that big guitar intro at the top of the show.
You got a bunch of drive on it.
Yeah, and I go to hit the tone, and it sounds like a bunch of bumblebees in a tin can, and I'm like, oh no! And I'm here now. I don't have time to fix this. This is the
last
tone
thing
we
you want to do is sweep a wah.
Right. This is, and that's before I even knew that the wah was it. I didn't know that was the problem. I was like, gosh, we're here now. This is this is the house we live in. It's just fine. It's burning around us.
Fine.
Yeah, but it's fine. So I love that. I love simplicity. I love not being able to break things. The number of 1 and 2 knob pedals I have that I just adore, because I don't even want 3. Don't give me tone, or don't give me gain. Just set it up. It's fine.
I really think there's a lot to that. Just make it sound right. So when I turn it on, it sounds right.
Yeah, I love that mentality.
Some of my favorite fuzz pedals are that way. That's kind of what it is. That's what it does. I
have a bunch of I have too many fuzz pedals, but if that's possible,
it's not.
But I have a bunch that are 1 and 2 knobs. 1 and 2 knobs. When it gets, I've got a. It's actually over here on the floor. It's a dual pedal. It's a big dual pedal. And it's got a Mark III germanium tone bender on one side of it. And it has too many knobs. It has 4 knobs. And I'm like, oh, it's got a bias, and it's got tone, and it's got volume, and it's got fuzz. And I'm like, can you go back to just volume and fuzz? Just that's all I want at most. I don't know. I know that I'm weird. I know that I'm that guy, and everybody else is like, no, I need all the tweakability. I was having this conversation about modelers, actually, with some friends recently. The reason I don't like modelers is not that I don't think they sound good. They give me too many options for my brain. Yeah.
Option fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah, and I just end up getting lost in it. It's why I don't like a lot of pedals. I don't like a whole bunch of gain stages. I like to just have a couple, and that's it. I see guitar players with like 4, 5, and 6 overdrive pedals on their pedal boards, and I'm like, I don't like this. It's too many different places where something weird could happen.
I think a lot of it, if you're in the studio and you're hunting for sounds, options is awesome. If you're playing live trying to do a thing, the options will mess me up. So I see reasons for lots of switchable capability, but typically that's not been what I've been trying to do.
Yeah.
Yet people clamor for it. So
and they want it, but at the same time, I'm sure you hear people that are like, they want the options, the crazy stuff, and then at the same time, the folks that make the really option laden stuff, they end up getting the cries for a 3-knob overdrive from them.
I've played some stuff that was really, really great, that had so many different options to switch, and I spent more time trying to figure out what sounded better than I did playing the guitar. And I'm like, man, I really just make it sound right.
Yeah, just make it sound great.
Yeah.
That's what killed the big pedal boards for me when I was doing the musicals and the stuff like that. I did have, the ES8 and like the big pedal board, and I found that I spent more time programming my pedal board than I did playing guitar.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it.
Right. I get that.
Yeah. Well, David, we're getting on close to the time here, because we want to have a little bit of time to go over on Patreon, and we'll see what kind of road stories from your Guitar Tech days I can drag out of you, because there's always great stories from Guitar Techs. That's listeners, if you take away nothing else from this episode, Guitar Techs are almost always way more interesting than the guitar players, because they've seen all the issues. I'm trying to think of who. I was listening to a conversation with someone. I can't remember now. Neither here nor there. I'm going to give the premise. The idea was they were talking about, I think they were talking about an amp, and it was an amp that a bunch of people loved, but they were super problematic. And so this artist that was using one, or it may have been even the builder, was talking to the artist who had been using one on the road for like years. And they were like, oh man, no, I love that amp. Never had any issues with it. It may have been a pedal, but I think it's an amp. Piece of gear. No, never had issues. It sounds great. Da-da-da-da. Then he went to the guitar tech and asked him, have you had any issues? He said, oh my God, all the time. It's always broken. And so I'm like, yeah, listen to the guitar tech. They know the real
fix it
stories.
before he gets here.
Exactly. Fix it before they even know there's a problem.
Oh yeah, there's no problem. What problem?
We're good here until tomorrow. Sweat off the brow.
That's right.
So that's where we're gonna go. David, I sure appreciate you. Where all can everyone find you?
Well, we're on Instagram. We've got a website where you can purchase our pedals. Facebook, all the things.
Yeah, all the things.
Pretty sure we have a TikTok.
Maybe. I have one that I never check anymore.
I'm just being stupid.
Oh gosh. Oh no, I had one. Like I said, I still have one. I occasionally log on and I'm like, 40 new followers. Why are you following me on? I don't do anything here anymore. Yeah. But also those links are down below, either in the description or in the show notes, depending on if you are on YouTube or if you are on your favorite podcast player. Make sure you can click those below. There's a whole bunch of other links down there. If you don't go down there, listeners, and look at all the links, there's affiliate links. There's all sorts of cool stuff down there, and you can find all kinds of more information. You can find out how you can support the podcast. Like if you wanted to hear the conversation that David and I are about to have over on Patreon, patreon.com/40watt podcast, where as little as $5 a month gets you in, and you can hear all the back episodes. There's a bunch at this point. I think there's over 100 back episodes over there on Patreon too.
Amazing.
So it's a ton of stuff over there. So go check that out. Appreciate your support. David, appreciate you coming on. Also, we didn't talk about it.
Ooh. But
your company name is Browne with an E.
It is.
And I'm realizing now your name is Browne with no E.
Correct.
What kind of sideshow are you running over there, David?
A janky, sly one. Browne had all these connotations with the Browne sound and all this other stuff. And I just wanted I wanted a little bit of differentiation. As I understand it, my name was originally spelled with an E. It was removed like many were. And I was just trying to make it a little more obvious who I was, that if you found Browne, you found me with the E on the end.
No, that was sort of what I speculated a little bit. It's just better SEO management, easier to find. There's nothing worse than trying to look up something that has the most generic name possible, right, and not being able to find it.
Right.
Please don't call your overdrive pedal drive pedal or something like that. Those kinds of things.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, do yourself a favor. Think about names early. Like, maybe not name your podcast the same name as a very popular music venue in Athens, Georgia. Don't ask me how I know. Yeah. So until next time, listeners, for those of you not going to join us over on Patreon, I sure appreciate y'all hanging out and listening. David, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. What a blast.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see y'all later. In the meantime, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.